In early March, a Newshub reporter reached out to a community commonly referred to as anti-vaxxers, requesting an interview about the measles cases in Christchurch for the 6 p.m. news slot. For many reasons, the request was declined by the group who were contacted. One of those reasons was that the New Zealand media outlets had already spent a week whipping the nation into a panic over a disease that was considered a standard childhood illness just a few decades ago. The reporter took exception to the suggestion the media had drummed up hysteria. A few days later, Duncan Garner, also employed by Newshub, unleashed a form of communication with no other meaning than to denigrate a person or persons on the basis of membership in a social group. It was broadcast as an opinion piece. However, it will no doubtedly go unpunished by his employer, and I'm sure the Broadcasting Standards Authority will also turn a blind eye to it, as it was his opinion. Newshub, however, provided Duncan Garner with a platform to promote what is effectively hate speech.
If you don't vaccinate your babies and your children, then you better have a medically supported reason why. Otherwise, I think you're a bloody idiot. They are the true virus or germ that should be put back in the bottle. You can now see how much they care for your child, or for you. It is zip zero. Murderous. This group is so dangerous they should come with a health warning and be stripped of their right to spread their message and their viruses.
New Zealand has just experienced what true hatred is, and the country is utterly speechless. But hate speech is alive and well in New Zealand. And even after the most disgusting act of violence this country has ever seen, you simply have to read the vile comments people feel brave enough to leave behind their keyboard following Friday's events. You certainly begin to look at the society you're raising your child in very differently. But hate speech isn't restricted to just religion, is it, Duncan? It, like diseases, has no boundaries. Even people who raise their children differently to you are targeted. They're labelled anti-vaxxers, as you clearly state, Duncan, gormless, Neanderthal murderers. A group of parents who are regularly accused of spreading misinformation and outright lies. A number of you will be thinking, how dare I bring this up after Friday's tragedy? But it hasn't stopped Newshub from attacking a person or persons on the basis of membership in a social group by releasing this little gem on Saturday, 24 hours later. Ironically, Newshub are promoting a series of articles on the age of outrage. Take a look at what you're promoting as news, Newshub. You might be able to answer your own question. Let's take a look at a few statements you've made, Duncan.
I think you're a bloody idiot, a selfish idiot. Your foolish approach. It is a foolish approach. Your cowardly lack of action in this area could see one of your fellow countrymen or women die.
Duncan, you seem to be of the opinion that all unvaccinated children are walking germ bombs, riddled with the disease and the ability to affect and kill with ease. I don't really know where to begin with how moronic your statement is. Do you have any idea how disease spreads? What makes a disease like measles deadly? I do, and I'm just a dad. If you apply your logic, Duncan, how did your parents and their generation survive to produce you and your generation? Your parents may have had a vaccine for diphtheria, TB, polio, but certainly not for measles. And how about your grandparents? How did they live without a vaccine for measles? How did they produce children? How did they live? How did they survive?
Is the measles. You can die from measles. Let me be clear. In 1991, here in New Zealand, 7 people died. It was our last outbreak. Did anyone remember that?
Yes, Duncan, I remember 1991. That was the year the data regarding the morbidity and demographic data, 1991, for measles and the 7 deaths was incomplete. I wonder what happened to that data, Duncan. The officials have been pretty cagey about it for a long time. Perhaps you could get Dr. Gillian Durham to explain. Our last outbreak was 1991. Are you sure about that, Duncan? Let's have a look. I'm going to use Dr. Google. Certainly more a reliable source than Dr. Journalist. Let's see what the ESR have to say. As you can see, Duncan, 1991 was not our last outbreak. The ESR certainly didn't think measles had been eradicated. And then this little gem.
Except the germ got out again because someone didn't vaccinate.
I think the ESR data will correct you on that, Duncan. But it doesn't stop you from saying that following a mass vaccination campaign, it took one person to not vaccinate to magically bring it back from eradication. Where was the disease hiding, Duncan? Because I've just showed you the ESR are well aware the disease never went out of circulation or was eradicated. But hey, you just blame that on an immigrant or a tourist. Convenient. Would you like me to sew a yellow star on my daughter's clothes, Duncan? Make it easier for you to cross the road when you see her. Be careful, Duncan. History has already shown us that it's a slippery slope to go down. You should look into the career of Edward Bernays. Government, corporations and dictators loved him. He taught them how to manipulate the thinking of a crowd or population by creating fear in their minds. An irrational fear that would circulate amongst the masses to create the desired outcome for those who were pushing a particular agenda. Whether that agenda was political or to sell a product, it didn't matter. It still worked. In wartime, it was called propaganda. Today, we call it public relations and marketing. And we're marketed to with fear on a daily basis. The fear of missing out, the fear it might happen to you. IMAC are particularly good at creating fear when it comes to the diseases they want you to vaccinate for. A simple story about chickenpox, but you quickly forget the sentences where they tell you it's a benign disease because you're confronted by harrowing images of a child in hospital, tubes everywhere. All rational thought process stop, and all you can think is, I don't want that to happen to my child. And you vaccinate them. That, however, is not chickenpox in a healthy, well-nourished child whose immune system is not overburdened by Pamol and antibiotics. It certainly wasn't how chickenpox played out for my daughter. Given that you feel my child should not have access to medical care, education, because of a decision we have consciously made, a foolish and cowardly decision, should we not then apply the same rules to the rest of the public who knowingly make foolish and cowardly decisions? Decisions that have an impact on others, as well as our medical and welfare systems? Because you're right, Duncan, there's nothing more crucial than good public health. So how about someone who knowingly drinks alcohol and drives a vehicle, kills or injures others? Are you going to deny health care and support? Perhaps you should. After all, drink driving could see one of your fellow countrymen or women die. It's preventable, but people still do it. How about people who smoke? The dangers are well advertised. We all know the long-term effects of tobacco. Are you going to deny them medical care or fine them because they make a choice that affects others? Again, preventable, but it's a personal choice. How about people who feed their kids junk food, soft drinks, which are really just food-like substances? Are they not so far removed from reality that they put their own children at risk? Given what we know about the dangers of these foods. Again, preventable. But real food is simply out of the price range for the majority of parents. You see, Duncan, unvaccinated kids are not the danger you make them out to be. They're not the ones crippling the system. They're not the ones creating disease and illness. It's the people who make poor decisions around alcohol, drugs, poor hygiene, and what they feed themselves and their children. Our healthcare statistics make it blindingly obvious for anyone who wants to look. But you're not looking, are you, Duncan? If you want to see what's killing us, Duncan, go ahead and sit in a food court anywhere in the country and look at the choices people are making. And when people make those choices, they provide an environment where disease and illness thrive and is more difficult to control. But in a healthy, well-nourished child, unburdened by antibiotics, Pamol and processed foods, diseases are almost a non-event. The same non-event measles and chickenpox was for your grandparents and my daughter. Remember, Duncan, what we call organic food was just food for your grandparents, not the nutrient-devoid crap we feed our children from a box today. I have a challenge for you, Duncan. In fact, I have two. Let's go to an A&E of your choice, Middlemore, Auckland, on a Friday or Saturday night, and we'll go through till dawn. Let's see who's filling up the waiting rooms. I'll give you a clue. It's not the children or the dangerous or gormless, or their supposed victims. It'll be filled with people who've made bad decisions around alcohol, drugs, and their lifestyle, or simply have no idea on how to treat a wound or an infection. Actually, let's wait until winter. Then you can see how utterly useless our population has become at treating a common cold. You'll also find the majority of them have had their flu jab. But it's okay, they can't treat a cold, because they'll take the marketing advice and soldier on. You can bring a camera crew and we'll film the masses of unvaccinated kids who aren't there. You can bring your chum, Dr. O'Sullivan, as well. He wants to financially penalise us as well, beginning to think he's missing out on revenue from every unvaccinated kid out there. Will you take that challenge, Duncan? You used to ask difficult questions of our politicians, but you don't ask them of our healthcare professionals. You just sit there and nod like a yes man and parrot the bullshit they feed you without question. How about you ask the questions about the inconsistent data regarding 1991 measles deaths? Duncan, why are you not getting stuck into the food producers and asking why it's cheaper to feed children from a box with ingredients you can't pronounce? Foods that are genetically modified and sprayed beyond recognition with pesticides and herbicides. Why are you not getting stuck into the drink companies, the fast food chains? We no longer have healthcare, Duncan. We have health management. And the nation is doing a piss poor job of managing their health. And that's one of the many reasons I and others have taken charge of our health and the health of our children. Not leaving it to someone who pushes drugs for symptoms and sees you as a recurring revenue. Duncan, instead of spitting venom my way, you should be asking me why I no longer vaccinate my child. But you won't. Instead, you'll continue to sit behind your mic, fueling hatred and making ridiculous statements simply because I choose to raise my child differently to you. If you took some time to ask a parent who no longer vaccinates how they care for their child during times of illness, you'll find it's pretty much how your grandparents would have done it. Do you consider your grandparents to be foolish and cowardly in their actions in raising your parents? Duncan, if you're really keen to stick it to a parent who no longer vaccinates, then you'll want to take my second challenge. My daughter's nearly 3.5. When she turns 5, let's sit down on live TV and go through our kids' medical records up to the age of 5. Let's look at the numbers of GP and A&E visits, numbers of prescriptions for Pamol, antibiotics, steroid creams. Let's look at the respiratory issues, chest infections, asthma. We'll look at dietary sensitivity and allergies. Let's compare who has the healthier child. I'll let you know that at almost 3.5, it's been nearly 2 years since she saw her GP. That's correct. She hasn't seen a GP in nearly 2 years. Her immune system has not been obliterated by Pamol or antibiotics or steroids. She doesn't eat processed foods. She doesn't drink milk. She doesn't eat grains. Her grandparents may indulge her occasionally. And that's fine. But I cook almost every meal she eats. She picks veggies out of the garden and eats them raw. I consider her to be free-range, organic. She's certainly not keeping my GP employed. But I'll give you a fighting chance on this challenge, Duncan. She's had the first 3 rounds of vaccines minus rotavirus. She's not unvaccinated, but she will never receive another vaccine. Are you willing to take that challenge, Duncan? Do you have the testicular fortitude to put your ego on the line and see who's raised the healthier kid? To see if my cowardly lack of action, my foolish approach have put my child at serious risk? Shall we see who's truly the delusional flake? Will you take that challenge, Duncan? The Ministry of Health won't do this. They won't compare vaccinated to unvaccinated. They keep coming up with reasons why that can't be done. You should be asking them why not. Surely you and your viewers would like to prove the delusional anti-vaxxers have it wrong. But I know of hundreds of parents with fully unvaccinated kids who are ready to take that challenge and be a part of that study, because we already know the answer. So what's it going to be, Duncan? Will you take that challenge? Or are you going to sit there and use your position to fuel hatred under the guise of public health and safety?